And now it's time for Power of Prophecy, continuing the legacy of Tex Mars, exposing evil, and promoting Jesus Christ as Savior. Here's your host, Jerry Barrett.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Power of Prophecy. I'm your host, Jerry Barrett. Honored to have you join me again this week. This week, I want to touch on a topic that continues to be in the news, continues to be front and center with our youth. It's climate change. And it doesn't seem to matter how many truth tellers are out there explaining that this is a hoax. It still falls on deaf ears. So I felt compelled to do another program to talk about climate change hypocrisy knows no bounds. That's the title of this week's program. The hypocrisy is, well, it's mind-boggling. How many people claim to support planet Earth, as they call it, Mother Earth, as some of these cultists call it, and it is a cult. Climate change is a cult. But then they live a lifestyle that's good for me, not for thee. They're jet-setting. They've got mansions. I saw a report where one of the Kardashians and Sylvester Stallone got a notice from the city of L.A. or the county of L.A. that they were 150% over their water usage for the month during a drought, during water restrictions. 150% over. Well, when you've got that much property, you got to keep the grass green, I guess. It's crazy. Knowing that there's a water shortage and you're more worried about your yard than your neighbor. It's not being a good neighbor, are they? But likewise, somebody, I can't remember who it was, took a 5-minute private jet flight from somewhere outside of Los Angeles to Los Angeles International Airport. 5-minute private plane. And the comment was they didn't want to get stuck on traffic on the 405. But when you're that powerful, that rich, and money is power, it doesn't matter. I'll buy carbon offsets is what some of them will say. And then you've got people like Greta and Rebellion Extinction and all of these other climate nut jobs that are out there destroying works of art, defacing private planes. All they're doing is whining, being destructive. They're not being productive. They are destructive. And much like Chicken Little, they keep harping that the sky is falling. But we're going to cover today some exposure of the lie that is climate change. And I want to start with a speech that was given at Oxford University by an Englishman with Russian heritage. His name is Konstantin Kisin, K-I-S-I-N, and he addresses the students at Oxford about wokeism and climate change. And this is such a powerful message. I mentioned it last week with Pat McShay, but I want you to hear, and I've cut it down. It's a long speech, but I've cut it down to, 5 minutes, and it's worth the time to listen to. Here is Konstantin Kisin.
I want to talk to those of you who are woke and who are open to rational argument. A small minority, I accept, because one of the tenets of wokeness is, of course, that your feelings matter more than the truth. But I believe in you. I believe there are those of you here who are woke, who are open to rational argument, so let me make one. We are told that your generation cares more than any other about one issue in particular, and that issue is climate change. We're told that many of you suffer from climate anxiety. You wish to save the planet. And for tonight, and tonight only, I will join you. I will join you in worshipping at the feet of Saint Greta of climate change. Let us all accept right here, right now, that we are living through a climate emergency and our stocks of polar bears are running extremely low. I join you in this view. I truly do. Now, what are we to do about this huge problem facing humanity? What can we in Britain do? We can only do one thing. You know why? This country is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions. which means that if Britain was to sink into the sea right now, it would make absolutely no difference to the issue of climate change. You know why? Because the future of the climate is going to be decided in Asia and in Latin America by poor people who don't care about saving the planet. You know why? Because they're poor. I come from Russia, which is not a poor country, it's a middle-income country. 20% of households in Russia do not have an indoor toilet. What they have is an outdoor toilet. And I don't mean one of those nice portaloos that we get here. I mean a wooden shack with a hole in the ground. How many of you are going to go home tonight and say, let's rip out our bathroom? And if you're not, why should they? 120 million people in China do not have enough food. I don't mean that they don't get dessert. I mean they suffer from malnutrition. That means that their immune system is breaking down because they don't have enough food. You're not going to get them to stay poor. Imagine you're Xi Jinping, the leader of China. When you were 10 years old, there was a revolution, a cultural revolution in your country. And people came and they put your father in prison. Your mother had to denounce him. Your sister killed herself. And you, no longer enjoying the protection of your formerly powerful father, were sent to a village where you lived in a cave house. And here you are, decades later. You have clawed your way up the bloody and greasy pole of Chinese politics to be the undisputed supreme leader of the very Communist Party that destroyed your family. And you know that the main thing you have to do to survive and to stay in power is to deliver the one thing that the people of China want: prosperity, economic growth. Where do you think climate change ranks on Xi Jinping's list of priorities? A third of all children who live in extreme poverty in the world live in India. That means they are starving and dying of preventable disease. Now, about 15 months ago, my wife got pregnant. And for 9 months, we talked about what our boy would look like, what he might do when he grows up. We looked at baby scans and videos on YouTube about what the fetus looks like at 9 months and 12 months and 20 months. And eventually he was born. Now, if you said to me that I had a choice, either my son had a serious risk of starving or dying from a preventable disease in the next year, or I could press a button and he would live. He would go to school. He would bring his first girlfriend home. He'd go to university and graduate. And then he'd get a job and get married and have children and become a man. But all I have to do is press this button. And for every day of my son's life, a giant plume of CO2 is going to get released into the atmosphere. Now, you're all very young, and most of you are not parents. Let me tell you something. There is not a parent in the world who would not smash that button so hard their hand bled. You are not going to get these people to stay poor. You're not even going to get them to not want to be richer. And so, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one thing we can do in this country to stop climate change. And that is to make scientific and technological breakthroughs that will create the clean energy that is not only clean, but also cheap. And the only thing that wokeness has to offer in exchange is to brainwash bright young minds like you to believe that you are victims, to believe that you have no agency, to believe that what you must do to improve the world is to complain, is to protest, is to throw soup on paintings. And we on this side of the house are not on this side of the house because we do not wish to improve the world. We sit on this side of the house because we know that the way to improve the world is to work, is to create, it is to build. And the problem with woke culture is that it's trained too many young minds like yours to forget about that.
Very powerful message. The constant beatdown of today's youth by this climate cult has produced untold levels of trauma and anxiety. It's never ending. There's a study that was released recently that showed something like 50% of young people are not going to have children because they're worried about the climate. This is so mind-boggling crazy that I cannot put into words how distraught I am for the future of humanity. If you look at it, none of these climate gurus and cult members have Jesus. None of them. They would know that the Bible teaches there will be seasons. And we're going to have hot, and we're going to have cold, and we're going to have cool, and we're going to have warm. Now, I laugh and tell people in Texas we have just a skosh of cold, a smidgen of cool, and a whole lot of hot. But that's part of being in the South. But the constant beatdown of these young people to buy into the garbage that the sky is falling is unfair and detrimental to humanity. And like Constantine said, we need to build and research and come up with cleaner energy and cheaper. I'm a proponent of nuclear energy. The plants aren't like what they were back when Chernobyl melted down or 3 Mile Island. The technology's better. The science is better. The energy is better than depending upon the sun and wind. And nobody talks about all the plastics that are used to make solar panels. All of the rare earth minerals where they destroy the earth to get to these minerals to make batteries. And if you're in the South, I know I'm lucky if I get 3 years out of a car battery. I cannot imagine having an EV and hoping that my battery makes it for 4, 5, 6 years before I have to drop all that money to get a new battery and then hope it lasts just as long. Now, back in 2023, December of 2023, when he was on Fox News, Tucker Carlson hosted Michael Schellenberger. They discussed the global effort to force only certain countries to reduce carbon emissions, like America, not doing anything with China, India, Latin America. But Tucker Carlson brought up a very touching point about John Kerry being 80 years old, not having many years left on this planet, and he's railing against coal-fired power plants and all the evils that are befalling Earth because of big industry. And then Michael Schellenberger, a journalist and an author, comes on and discusses this. And I've got a 3-minute clip I want you to hear on this.
There shouldn't be any more coal-fired power plants permitted anywhere in the world. That's how you can do something for health. And the reality is that we're not doing it. So, the measure here is really sounding the alarm bell. I find myself getting more and more militant because I do not understand how adults who are in position of responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis.
Just even a year or two ago, global elites used to pretend to care about people, but they're not even pretending anymore. I mean, here they fly their private jets, separate private jets, including for the Prime Minister of Britain, his Foreign Secretary, King Charles, all taking their own private jet at the very moment that they're raising energy prices to historically high levels. And as you just saw there with John Kerry demanding the shutdown of coal plants, which will mean that people will burn wood and dung in China, and they will starve, and they will not have enough to eat, and you'll have riots in the streets. I think that what's so different now is that the elites are just openly and blatantly expressing their hatred of humankind, particularly the hatred of working people, of poor people, people both in the United States, in the so-called flyover states that they hate so much, but also in places like India and China and Africa where people want to live a better life, and that's what coal has traditionally provided. What's so interesting, of course, is that the obvious alternative to coal is natural gas. If you cared about climate change, if this was actually about climate change, you would just produce more natural gas because it produces half the carbon emissions of coal. The United States reduced our carbon emissions by 22% between 2005 and 2020, with 61% of that reduction coming just from switching from coal to natural gas. But John Kerry and other climate activists are against natural gas, and they've been stifling the production of natural gas, clean-burning American natural gas, which is the cleanest in the world. So it's so obviously hypocritical, but worse than that, I think it's really anti-human, and that's really what gets at it. It's a religion, it's a cult, and it really is about being against humankind, against humanity. There's a financial element here, obviously, too, where the largest donor to the Democratic Party, George Soros, but also Michael Bloomberg, And a whole set of other oligarchs have a strong interest in keeping energy scarce. I think that's what is a big driver of this. That's why they want to shut down nuclear plants, coal plants. They want to stifle natural gas production. And they want us to use weather-dependent, energy-dilute, primitive sources of energy, so-called renewables that are actually anything other than renewable. And these are technologies that require 300 to 900 times more land than natural gas or nuclear plants, and that keep energy expensive and scarce so that they can control the energy markets around the world. And so it's really all three of these things. It's sort of a grotesque display of anti-human power, of elitist power. It's also a religion. You know, these guys actually think of themselves as saving the planet, but it's just a grift. It's a scam in order to keep energy supplies, energy which should be abundant. I mean, natural gas and nuclear are, basically infinite sources of energy, and keep energy scarce and dependent so that they can exercise greater control over the population.
There is the ultimate answer. Control over the population. Now, John Kerry claims to be a champion of the environment, but he flew on a private plane, and I don't know if he chartered it or if it was his own family private plane, but he flew into Iceland to receive an award for his service in fighting climate change. And a reporter just happened to be at the little private airport where Kerry landed, and he asked him about taking a private plane to receive a climate award, and this is Kerry's response.
If you offset your carbon, it's the only choice for somebody like me who is traveling the world to win this battle. I negotiated the Paris Accords for the United States. I've been involved in this fight for years. I negotiated with President Xi to bring President Xi to the table so we could get Paris. And I believe the time it takes me to get somewhere, I can't sail across the ocean. I have to fly to meet with people and get things done. But what I'm doing almost full time is working to win the battle of climate change. And in the end, if I offset and contribute my life to do this, I'm not going to be put on the defensive.
Devote my life to this hoax. I'm not going to be put on the defensive. What a smug hypocrite. But John Kerry also had the audacity to defend other elites who fly private jets to go to these stupid conferences on climate change.
Private aviation is an example of something where people are starting to pay more attention, but when, people who go to Davos to talk about climate change fly private, it seems like they don't want to make...
Well, I've talked to them about it. They offset. They buy offsets, they offset, and they are working harder than most people I know to be able to try to affect this transition.
Right.
Do you know what offsets are? They're claiming to spend money on these carbon offsets, but is it a scam? Is it a hoax? Just like climate change? Bill Gates defended his use of private jets.
I buy the gold standard of funding Climeworks to do direct air capture that far exceeds my family's carbon footprint. And I spend billions of dollars on climate innovation. So, should I stay at home and not come to Kenya and learn about farming and malaria? Anyway, I'm comfortable with the idea that not only am I not part of the problem by paying for the offsets, but also through the billions that my Breakthrough Energy group is spending, that I'm part of the solution.
How smarmy. The billions, he just casually throws that out, the billions I'm spending on this solution and this drug and this genocide. He didn't say that, but that's part of what Bill Gates does. But the smugness, the smarminess of John Kerry, Bill Gates, et al., all of them. Now, Judith Curry, John Stossel does great work. If you go to YouTube and search John Stossel, he has got some tremendous reports. And he had Judith Curry on one of his videos. She is a climate scientist, and at one time she was the darling of the media because she was pushing climate change until she wasn't. She re-examined her work, and she admitted that her study was flawed Because of that, nobody wanted to talk to her. She was persona non grata. In an interview with Stossel, she explains how the media and higher education are rewarding climate alarmism.
Climate scientists have an incentive to exaggerate risk.
Why? What's in it for them?
Fame and fortune.
She knows about that because she once spread alarm about climate change. And the media loved her when she published this study saying there was an increase in hurricane intensity.
We found that the percent of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes had doubled. And so this was picked up by the media. Alarmists said, oh, here's the way to do it. Tie extreme weather events to global warming. I was adopted by the environmental advocacy groups and the alarmists, and I was treated like a rock star.
Then the ClimateGate scandal taught Curry that many researchers aren't so open-minded. Leaked emails showed university climate scientists conspiring to hide data.
It showed a lot of really ugly things, avoiding Freedom of Information Act requests, trying to get journal editors fired from their job.
There's a climate change industry set up to reward alarmism.
The origins go back to the 1980s. And the UN Environmental Program, they hated the oil companies, and they seized on the climate change issue as one to move their policies along. The IPCC wasn't supposed to focus on any benefits of warming. The IPCC's mandate was to look for dangerous human-caused climate change. Then the national funding agencies directed all the funding in the field. About 10 years ago, the editor of the journal Science, she wrote this political rant about we need to stop emissions now that was published in Science. So what kind of message does that give? Promote the alarming papers and don't even send the other ones out for review. If you wanted to advance in your career, like be at a prestigious university, get a big salary, have big laboratory space, get lots of grant funding, be director of an institute, well, there was clearly one path to go.
Climate change is $1 billion industry. Way too many people are making gobs of money writing about it and promoting it. Nobody can challenge the narrative because there is no funding for them. But physicist Mark Mills had a very interesting question.
Insufficient attention has been paid to following the money. The environmental industrial complex actually has more money in the PR game, in the lobbying game, than the real industry. They have billions of dollars to do not build a thing, but just to oppose building things.
They're using those billions of dollars to sue administrations like Trump's EPA, trying to cut regulations. In Trump 1, they spent billions fighting everything that Trump wanted to do for energy independence, tooth and nail. And here is science writer John Enton. He's got something very interesting.
These scares drive donations. They always feel that the only way they can talk about environmental issues is to frame it with hysteria, crisis. They also recognize that hysteria generates donations. And the oxygen for these organizations is money donated by people who think they're doing good.
People think they're doing good, and all they're doing is financing more and more control over their personal lives. And finally, I want to get Princeton professor Dr. William Hopper, Happer. He claims we're in a CO2 famine. It seems to me that he actually understands what photosynthesis is. Listen to this.
More CO2 is good for the world. It's not bad for the world. And so it's absurd to be trying to reduce CO2. We're in a CO2 famine now compared to what is normal for plants. And just about any plant, if you give it more CO2, and a lot more, it will do better. If you look from satellites, Australia is a poster boy of greening of the entire world, especially Western Australia. So it's unbelievable that they've managed to turn this beneficial gas, a part of life, into a threat.
Now, Dr. John Clauser is a co-winner of the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics. He's one of the leading authorities on quantum mechanics. he has come out and lambasted the green agenda that the World Economic Forum controlled countries are pushing as dangerous corruptions of science that threatens the world's economy and well-being of millions and billions of people. According to Dr. Clauser, there is no real climate crisis. There is, however, a very real problem with providing a decent standard of living to the world's largest population and an associated energy crisis. The World Climate Declaration opposing this hoax was signed by hundreds of scientists and professionals from around the world. The document states, quote, "There is no climate emergency," close quote. Now, Dr. Patrick Moore was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and he has testified that man-made climate change narrative is a dangerous hoax perpetrated by the elite to take away our most basic freedoms. Listen to Dr. Patrick Moore on climate change is a scam.
First, there is actually no proof that we are causing the warming. There's a number of reasons to say that the evidence is actually against the hypothesis that we're causing the warming, because there's been warming and cooling cycles all through the history of life, and some of them are longer than others. Like the last ice age before this one was 300 million years ago, and then it was warm for nearly 300 million years before it cold again like it is now. So that's a big cycle. But there's smaller cycles, and the ice age we're in now has cycles called major glaciations, which there have been over 20 of in the last 2.5 million years when the ice age set on in the northern hemisphere. Ice came in the southern hemisphere many million years earlier because it's completely different. But the Earth has cooled gradually in fits and starts for the last 50 million years. We are at the tail end of a 50 million year cooling period, and that is well known, and the graphs are available on the internet to show you that just after the time of the dinosaurs, well, 15 million years after the time the dinosaurs went extinct, the Earth was at its hottest in hundreds of millions of years. Sure. The Eocene thermal maximum. Everybody knows about it. They just ignore it. We also know that there was a Minoan warm period, a Roman Egyptian warm period, a medieval warm period, and now the modern warm period. In between each of one were cooling periods, the last one being the Little Ice Age, which began to end around 1700 as the temperature started warming again rather than cooling. Just for example, the last time the River Thames froze over in England was 1814. It had been freezing over regularly for about 300 or 400 or 500 years before that. But it stopped then and hasn't frozen over since. We didn't cause that warming from 1700 to 1814. And we didn't actually cause this warming trend to start at all in 1700. Just going back to the early 1900s, from 1910 to 1940, it warmed the same amount as it did between 1970 and 2000, which was the last major spurt. You know, NASA now has so manipulated its temperature curve as to hide the cooling that occurred between 1940 and 1970. They've just eliminated it. They just adjust the numbers.
$1.8 billion in funding. That's why they adjusted the numbers. Everything comes back to money. They will lie through their teeth to get funding. Everybody that has come before Congress begging for money to research climate change has lied through their teeth to scaremonger everybody into believing this hoax. I've got more from Dr. Patrick Moore on the second half. I want to set up the hypocrisy by showing what scientists have really said, not these hoaxers that are out there scaring people, the fear-mongerers. And I'm laying the foundation before we expose some of these hypocrites in the climate change movement. I've got to take a brief pause, and when I come back, we're going to dive right back in. You're listening to Power of Prophecy. Stay with us, won't you? I'll be right back. Hello, friends. Jerry Barrett back with you again. I want to tell you about an outstanding DVD documentary by Joel Gilbert that we're offering through the ministry. It's entitled The Climate According to A.I. Al Gore. In his film, An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore proclaimed a climate emergency. He became the godfather of today's worldwide climate change movement. Al Gore's no scientist, but he has repeatedly claimed his Harvard professor, Roger Revelle, was the source of his climate science. Director Joel Gilbert, who worked for then U.S. Senator Al Gore, digs deep and discovers that Revelle had in fact rejected Gore's climate alarmism in spite of his claims. Through his investigation, Mr. Gilbert finds that the real origin of Al Gore's climate apocalypse came from his time at Vanderbilt Divinity School. Gilbert also demonstrates that Gore plagiarized a radical environmental book from the 1940s to produce his 1992 manifesto, Earth in the Balance. In The Climate According to A.I. Al Gore, Gilbert confronts an AI-generated Al Gore about his entire life history, his struggle to fulfill the political ambitions laid out for him by his parents, and his exploitation of climate politics to offset his personal insecurity. This film exposes the climate scare as nothing more than a political tool used by groups who wish to undermine free market capitalism and impose big government socialist ideals upon unsuspecting voters. This is a tremendous expose on Al Gore. It's 110 minutes, and it's only $20. Please add $6 shipping and handling. That will make your total $26 for The Climate According to A.I. Al Gore. You can order your copy by phoning us toll-free in the United States and Canada at 1-800-234-9673. Again, that's 1-800-234-9673. If you care to phone our regular line, that number is 512-263-9780. We're in the office Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. If you don't get a hold of us, please leave your name, your number, and a brief message. We'll call you back as quickly as we can. Now, if you want to order this at our secure shopping cart, just go to powerofprophecy.com. Powerofprophecy.com. You can use your Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. Whether you phone it, whether you go on to our online shopping cart, there's an ad for this documentary right there on the main page. You click on it, you put in your name, your address, put in your charge card information, select a method of shipment, hit submit, we'll get it and get it coming to you, usually by the next business day. Now, if you care to send in a check, money order, or cash, please make your check or money order payable to Power of Prophecy, and you can mail it to us here at 4819 R.O. Drive, Suite 102, Spicewood, Texas, and our zip code is 78669. The Climate According to A.I. Al Gore. Amazing documentary. You need a copy. If you don't have it, get yours today. $26 postpaid. Okay, now let's return to our regular program. Today we're talking climate change hypocrisy knows no bounds. Now, Dr. Patrick Moore, he appeared on Louder with Crowder. This is where I got this audio clip from. But the amount of knowledge that he puts forth during this interview, it's worth the listen. It's about almost an hour long, and it is tremendous. So I only took little snippets from it to share with you. Here he is talking about NASA and NOAA.
We do know that NASA and NOAA have both manipulated the data set to make it look like it's warmed more than it actually has. We know that for a fact.
Why? Why would they want to modify or change the data set? Well, Dr. John Clauser, the Nobel physicist, claims that the climate emergency touted by Al Gore, Joe Biden, John Kerry, and others doesn't exist. But why? NASA and NOAA are modifying data for some purpose, right? Well, listen to what they're doing according to Dr. Patrick Moore.
The catastrophists just exaggerated out of all proportion and doom and gloom. The end is nigh. The world is coming to an end in 10 years if we don't do something. 10 years later, it hasn't happened. And then they predict it again because people forget that they predicted 10 years ago that it was going to be gone in 10 years. That's how the doomsday prophets have always worked from the beginning of time. They take a reasonably long time period, like 10 years, and say, if we don't act today, in 10 years, we will be doomed. And then 10 years goes by, the ice caps are still there. Al Gore predicted they'd be gone a few years ago. They're still there, and then he's saying it again now, right? Exactly the same thing he said before, which did not come true, and they get Nobel Peace Prizes for this. It's all through history. People have honored those who proclaim doom is coming.
Just like Chicken Little. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. You remember... Gosh, I don't even remember how long ago it was. Ocasio-Cortez said that if we don't do something now, we're going to lose the planet in the next 5-7 years, something squirrely like that. It's been about 5 years since she said that, I think. Have you noticed a change? No, I haven't either. But my question is, and nobody wants to answer this. If climate change was real, if we were facing a melting of epic proportions of the polar ice caps, and the sea rise was going to be immense, there was Neil deGrasse Tyson said that, another one of these alarmists, claimed that with the ice melt, the sea level would rise to the elbow on the Statue of Liberty. Well, it's not going to happen. But, okay. Another person out there filling the airwaves with garbage and people buying everything that's on controlled media as the gospel. Instead of looking for people like Dr. Patrick Moore, Dr. Clauser, a Nobel physicist. Mark Mills is a tremendous listen. If you go on YouTube, he appears a number of times with John Stossel. And I urge you to go to YouTube and search John Stossel and look at the reports he's putting forth. Now, because he is not part of controlled media. You know, I followed Stossel when he was on 2020 on ABC with Baba Wawa and Hugh Downs. Did tremendous work. Now they're labeling him as a libertarian. They're kind of poo-pooing on his work because he's not one of them anymore. That's what they do. They turn on those who no longer buy the lie and care to spread the propaganda. But I'm going to go back to my question. If there is a rise in sea levels, why would a bank offer millions of dollars in mortgages, maybe hundreds, maybe billions, in mortgages to homes on the coast? Barack Obama has a home in Martha's Vineyard. If the sea level rises to the elbow of the Statue of Liberty, Martha's Vineyard will be underwater, way underwater. Oh, but wait, there's more. Obama built a mansion on the beach in Hawaii. Mark Zuckerberg has a ranch on Hawaii. Did they pay cash for this? Probably so, because they're filthy rich. But there are neighbors who are getting financed to build or move to existing structures on the coasts. Why would a bank give a 30-year mortgage to something that could be underwater in the next, as Al Gore said, in the next 10 years? And then 10 years later he says it again because it didn't come to pass. This is idiotic. Why can't we use critical thinking to understand that these banks aren't going to throw bad money at a property they believe is going to be underwater in 10 years? If it is, the people who bought the house and got funded, they're off scot-free. Well, I can't control climate change, so my insurance is going to have to pay off the mortgage, and I don't have to pay anything. This is crazy. It doesn't compute in my brain. And another question. Why is it that these climate scaremongers are the ones that are flying private jets all around the world? Oh, I'm buying carbon offsets. Are you really? Is that doing any good? Are they pulling carbon out of the air? Or is it a scam just to make money? Or is it you slide a couple $1 million to this company that claims that they're doing this, and everybody laughs behind closed doors at our idiocy for buying this garbage? Seriously. Now, Ella Emhoff is the daughter of the husband of former Vice President Kamala Harris. She is one plain-looking chick with goofy glasses, a unibrow, but they tried to tout her as a model. She wants to be an influencer, and she was on TikTok recently discussing her anxiety over climate change. She has bought the lie, or she's perpetrating the lie and getting paid under the table. Who knows? But she claims that this climate anxiety has made her feel very heavy. And according to the research and the reports and surveys that I've read, this is typical of today's youth. They feel that this anxiety over our climate is just weighing on them. But the loony left continues to amplify fears about climate change, has done so for decades. There was a panelist on NBC, named Anand Giridharadas. I'm not even going to spell it. It's forever. He claimed that he's more afraid of climate change than getting mugged in Washington, D.C. This was after Trump took over the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. He's more worried about climate change than getting mugged. Took a shot at Trump and the climate in one sentence. But the stepdaughter of Kamala Harris, with her ranting, what about her stepmom? She flew private jets all over the country during her workless campaign, speaking to tens of people. And I read an article last week where Kamala was in a private plane watching a speech through the Wi-Fi on her laptop, and they were fixing to land. She told the pilots to circle around until the end of the speech. She wanted to see the end of the speech before they could land. How much fuel was wasted? How much pollution was put into the atmosphere so she could watch the end of this speech on some streaming network? Where is Ella Emhoff complaining about that? Where is Greta complaining about that? Oh, no, well, they're not going to complain about Kamala because she's one of them that spread this hoax that we have a climate emergency. She's an alarmist just like all the others. But I mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. he has come out in multiple posts about being concerned about the climate. He's very concerned about global warming. But it didn't prevent him from dropping $300 million on a 287-foot-long yacht. This is bigger than a lot of people's houses. But he dropped $300 million on this boat. I wonder, do you think this boat runs on solar panels and batteries? No. No, it does not. He calls this boat Launchpad. The critics call it a climate hypocrite's hideaway. Back in March of 2024, this yacht debuted sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. It is powered by four MTU diesel engines, and it can reach a speed of 24 knots. 4 diesel engines. So, not solar, not wind, not sails. Nope, it's powered by diesel engines. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that a fossil fuel? Isn't that bad for the environment? Oh, yeah, well, yeah, but Zuckerberg is very worried about our climate. Just ask him. Here's another one. New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Oh, she cares deeply about our environment. Oh, she signed a bill recently that fines fossil fuel companies $75 billion for alleged damage to the climate. $75 billion. But in her personal life, well, she's got a different set of rules because she's powerful. She's the governor. Come to find out, she spent a small fortune on private jets. According to the New York Post, Hochul spent $415,000 on private jets. She's taken at least 30 flights aboard these private jets since 2021. If you read reports, private jets are one of the worst at polluting the planet. They're adding greenhouse gas emissions at a staggering rate. But Hochul has taken 30 flights aboard private jets? Oh, but she cares about the environment, right? This is the hypocrisy I'm talking about. Rules for thee, not for me. You know, the people that talk the most about addressing climate change never seem to live by these rules. But we know why. It's about control. They want to control everything about your everyday life. This relates perfectly with COVID, the scamdemic. What did they want? They wanted you to have the jab, knowing full well that it would kill you, or at least you would suffer maladies for the rest of your days, knowing full well that it could sterilize men and women of child-rearing age, making you wear a mask, making you have a vaccine passport, demanding you would get a vaccine that is untested, and now we know that the testing that they did do, they knew that this would lead to this, but mandating people to take this jab or they got fired. One of my dear friends passed away during Rona, and I had to watch his funeral on Facebook Live. Wasn't allowed to go to his funeral. There were a number of people who lost parents, lost friends, and never got to have those final moments to say goodbye because they were shuttered in their houses and forbidden from traveling. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom's hanging out in a fancy-dancy restaurant with a bunch of moneyed people. The Austin mayor flew down, the then Austin mayor, flew down to Mexico for Thanksgiving. Good for me, not for thee. The same old story, control. And that's what these climate alarmists are doing. You will hear them preach sustainability. They want to save the planet. They will put all kinds of posts on social media about lambasting those with carbon footprints that are enormous. And after they post, they get on their own private jet and return to their multi-million-dollar mansions. These are the rich and the famous. Are they climate advocates or are they climate alarmists? The hypocrisy is thick, and there are those, besides myself, who are speaking up and fueling the backlash on these hypocrites. When these people's carbon emissions that they care so much about outpace an entire town, an entire city, an entire village, how can you call yourself a warrior for climate? You can't without lying to yourself. I have a list of 9 activists that live in these high-dollar mansions that fly private jets all over the place. Coming in at number 1, Taylor Swift. Yep, Comey loves Swift. He says that she gives him strength to fight bullies. She topped the 2022 private jet poll. Her aircraft racked up over 170 flights with nearly 8,300 tons of CO2 emissions. That's more than 1,000 times the average American. The team that supports Taylor Swift claims that the plane is loaned out. You're still responsible for that jet and the carbon footprint that you're putting out there. Quit being a hypocrite. Coming in at number 2, Leonardo DiCaprio. Everybody talks about when he decided to become a climate warrior, he bought a hybrid vehicle and then an EV, and he put solar panels all over his house because he was going to be an example, an eco-warrior. But then he flew private jets to go to these summits on climate change. He lives in a gigantic mansion. He cruises in yachts the size of apartment buildings. So even if he is funding these green organizations, if he's doing climate documentaries, if he's speaking at these climate summits for the UN, is he a hypocrite? Most assuredly. Number 3 was Bill Gates. I've already talked about that scumbag. Coming in at number 4, Oprah Winfrey. Now, her philanthropy has been praised. Her lifestyle is anything but low impact. She has multiple estates, frequent private jet trips. Some have been reported under 20 minutes. Her environmental footprint is drawing side eyes from activists, wondering where the line between excess and success lies. An eco-warrior hypocrite. Al Gore. Yep, coming in at number 5. He's the scammer extraordinaire. He came out with an inconvenient truth. He won a Nobel Prize. His Nashville mansion uses more electricity in a month than the average U.S. home does in a year. If you topple that off with jet travel, private jet travel, his carbon emissions are an inconvenient truth. Coming in at number 6, Steven Spielberg. His private jet flights reportedly released over 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide in a single year. Number 7, Jay-Z. His 2022 jet usage earned him a spot on the CO2 offender list with almost 7,000 tons emitted. Of course he's invested in green tech, but he lives a lavish, globe-trotting lifestyle, has massive properties, thus making him an eco-hypocrite. Boxer Floyd Mayweather reportedly took 177 private jet flights in 1 year, racked up over 7,000 tons of emissions. His flashy lifestyle and carbon-heavy travel habits have drawn backlash from critics who say climate goals and flex culture don't mix. They called him out. He's a hypocrite. Alex Rodriguez, formerly of the major leagues, he played for the Seattle Mariners, Texas Rangers, New York Yankees. Now he's a broadcast analyst at Fox Sports. He made the list for 5,300 tons of CO2 emissions by private jet in 2022. And I want to close with this. I have 4 reasons why climate change is a flat-out hoax. Now, the naysayers can say that I'm not a climate scientist. No, I am not. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express one time, but that doesn't make me a climate scientist. But I am a realist. But if people were to take the scientific method into account, no intelligent person can fail to see the constant drumbeat of these hysterical claims about the climate are insults if you're looking for the truth. One of the 4 reasons that climate change is a hoax: rampant scientific fraud. You and I may not understand climate science, but we can spot cheating a mile away. One of the most brazen instances of inexcusable scientific misconduct is documented by photographic evidence gathered during a 3-month investigation by a veteran meteorologist. The NOAA placed hundreds of official global warming thermometers entirely unsuitable for gathering natural temperatures. They were adjacent to hot engines of parked vehicles. They were on asphalt-covered roofs. They were near hot exhaust vents of air conditioning units. They were on heat-retaining airport tarmacs and paved parking lots. They were next to heat-retaining rock formations and brick buildings. All of these skew the data. I did a search a couple years ago, and I saw where they put some of these weather stations to gather this data. It's astounding. Number 2 on this list is the duping of John and Jane Public. This was reported in Forbes by the late Dr. Stephen Schneider, one of the climate industry's loudest alarmists. He was a former professor of climatology at Stanford. He was a lead author on numerous UN climate reports. He let this slip, quote, "We need broad-based support to capture the public's imagination. We have to offer up scary scenarios, make simplified dramatic statements, and make little mention of any doubts. Each of us has to decide what the right balance is between being effective and being honest." Number 3, a long trail of wildly inaccurate predictions. Talked about that. Al Gore constantly saying in 10 years the planet's going to be overrun with water. AOC saying that in 7 years we're going to be wiped out. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the water level is going to be at the elbow of the Statue of Liberty. And then 10 years later they repeat the same garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. The problem is the people are buying this. And number 4, the intentional concealment of inconvenient parts of climate history. You heard Greenpeace founder Dr. Patrick Moore talk about 30 years of climate reports were nullified basically by NOAA, NASA. 30 years because it didn't support their hypothesis. Their hypocrisy. What happened to the data gathered during the Dust Bowl era? That was worse than anything I've lived through. The temperatures were sky high, a lot hotter than they are now. But they won't tell you that. They won't tell you that there weren't more hurricanes in this heat. There weren't more tornadoes. There weren't more severe weather events during the Dust Bowl era. All they want to do is scare you and control you. The hypocrisy is deep and it is wide. I want to thank you for tuning in and giving me an hour of your time. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, I pray you will tune in again next week at this same time. Tune in and discover the power of prophecy.